We're here with the first of our Where Are They Now chats with Phil Woodbury. How you going, Phil?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Tony. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for having a chat with us. Tricky time at the moment with coronavirus and isolation and things. You keeping well?
Yeah, I'm trying to not go stir crazy. Working from home every day and trying to manage a team from home as well. So a lot of those people have never worked from home. So it's been tricky in the workspace. But I think the trickiest part is having kids locked at home whilst you're trying to work. I think that's probably the trickiest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I agree. How do you think Australia's going in terms of, coronavirus as a whole?
Not too bad. I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually involved in making the dashboards for our ministers and that to see how we're tracking and people that are applying for grants and things like that. So doing a lot of the tracking for Service New South Wales. So I've got a bit of insider knowledge there. So we're not doing too bad.
All right. So where would you like to start? I'd like to go right back, like back to the 90s and
Back to
find
the
out
90s.
where your first interest in cars or motorsport came from.
Yeah, so back to the 90s, back to my fluoro clothes that my mum used to dress me in and all that sort of fun stuff. I think, I don't know, probably motorsport and cars, it's sort of been bred into me a bit from my dad. He's always been a bit of a rev head, always had a car or something in the shed. And, growing up, he had an XY that we used to build together. And then, further on, he had a few other cars that we played around with and always watched racing. And so it was kind of bred into me from a pretty young age, I think.
You're actually the youngest of four in the family, right? And you got three older sisters. So
only boy, so they stopped at perfection, I think. But
well, safe to say, your dad would have been pretty excited when you were born, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I always get the "how come you've got the same name as your dad" question. And like it's exactly the same name, same middle name, everything. Always get that question, and my standard response now is that he was supposed to put his name on the birth certificate. I was supposed to put my name on the birth certificate, but he filled in, his name. So I think that's what actually happened.
Okay, I thought it would have been something to do with your dad seems pretty keen on American traditions and stuff like that, with the Mustang and all that. So whether that was a bit of Yankee American influence.
Well, I think, but at the time when I was sort of born, that was sort of the pre having the American influence sort of thing. Didn't really know much about American cars or anything back then. So I think it was very Aussie back then.
Yeah. So then, how did you get into RC? How old were you, and do you remember your first RC car?
I remember my first RC car. I don't remember how old I was. It was pretty young. I think I was maybe 6 or so. And I remember getting it. It was a Tamiya, like all cars back then used to be. It was a Tamiya Rookie Rabbit. So I think all my friends had the Grasshopper, and I was the one with the Rookie Rabbit. So I used to be able to like scoot across the paddocks and stuff and try and beat them at the ripe old age of 6. But I think as well, Dad used to own a slot car track up at Budgie where we used to live. So I was probably more into the slot cars than the radio control cars back then. So he had that, and I think the day Mum was out of hospital, she took me to the slot car track, bassinet or whatever, sat me on the front seat of the car in the bassinet and drove me there. So I was always there. I used to, as you know, that slot car trucks aren't very high, so they're like what, I don't know, not even a metre high. I used to have to stand on a milk crate to be able to race one. And all the 16, 17-year-old kids used to get really pissed off because a 4-year-old that couldn't really talk properly was beating them. So yeah, so that was probably more of how I started with the racing stuff.
And what about your first nitro car? We're sort of getting to the point where maybe you had your first RC race. Did you race electric anywhere, or was nitro?
So I got another Tamiya, a Stadium Thunder, I think it was called. It was a 2-wheel drive stadium truck. And this was Dad was building a Mustang, a '69 Mustang that we've still got actually, and it was right around the corner from Castle Hill Hobbies. When they were up on the second floor, I don't know what the name of the street was, but they're up on the second floor there. So I used to whilst Dad was working on the Mustang, I used to go up to the hobby shop and look and point at all the cars that I wanted. And I think I might have asked for one of them for my birthday, and that was the Stadium Thunder. And I remember getting it. We went. My birthday's near Easter, so we went up the coast for Easter, and I took the box with us, and I made Dad stay up all night and build it so that we're ready to go the next day. And so that car I ended up racing it at Lithgow. That was the first time that I raced a car. I didn't do very well. I think I had it was the start of Lithgow's sort of racing, so it was pretty much just if you had an electric car, you all raced together. So I was just driving over the top of people that had touring cars and stuff. So, yeah.
So then your first nitro car then, coming to Penrith, that's my earliest memory of you sort of racing back in the day. What do you remember about that sort of era where you started actually travelling away from home to race at other places?
Yeah, so with the racing at Lithgow, I think I did one race with that Stadium Thunder, and I watched people race nitro cars at the same track, and then it was instantly, no, I've got to have a nitro car. Can't have this quiet stuff. Got to have something loud, obnoxious. So I ended up getting a Traxxas Fortec, super fast back in the day. So I got that. We raced that for a while, and there was a few guys from Lithgow saying that they were going down to Penrith to race. There's a good club down there. They go down on a Tuesday night and race down there. So one night we decided, Tuesday night we'll go down, and the rest is history, I guess. We raced there for quite a lot of years, and I think I started out with that Traxxas Fortec, and then I moved up to an old Neo. And it was the flashiest thing since Michael Jackson. It was dead set, had aluminium everything on it, and its claim to fame was that it was Alex Kousos's old Neo that I think he won a Nationals with. So, like, as a kid, I thought that was like the best thing, and I hope Alex watches this so he can know that that I used to be a big fan. So,
And other events that you did, in those early days, obviously the club level, do you remember some of the other bigger events? I'm thinking, like the Summer Nats and the Winter Champs and Mecca Challenges, and we're racing at a bit more. So it's not quite to the state and national level yet, but what do you remember from those, early days where you kind of, the learning curve steep and you're working your way through?
Yeah, probably the biggest one that sticks out to mind. Like, so we started racing at Penrith, and then, a few of you guys from Penrith, sort of said that you're going to start racing in the Mecca series. That was probably the one that really stood out for me as one that was a big learning curve, and it was also a lot of fun to race as well. It was pretty much unlimited. Like, you could have 5-port motors and roller bodies, and the cars were pretty wild as a touring car that wasn't really it's meant to have a roller body on it and that. And it had, over the time, it had I think I remember Darren Campbell, Alex Kousos was racing. I think it's Greg Brooks. So there was like 3 guys there that were quite competitive, and they probably taught me a lot in the early, not to talk to a lot, but a lot actually of racing. So, and probably got that urge to try and go a little bit further with it all. So. It was definitely the Mecca series. There were some good tracks on it too. Like, we went up to up the coast. What was the place called? I think it was Miranda. Miranda? No, not Miranda. No. What was the place called up the coast? I can't remember what it was called. Was it Miranda? Miranda's down south.
I'm trying to think where it was now.
I can't think where it was. It was up the coast, wasn't it? And it was at a
Mingara.
like a Mingara. That was it, Mingara. Yeah. So we went up there, had a massive straight. And it was about that time that Matt and I had started to play with engines and stuff like that together. So he had his pull start motor that was actually faster down the straight than my 5-port. so yeah, it was pretty fun times.
I was going to ask you about Matt, and how did you meet Matt, or did you know him previously from other car things?
So it goes back a long way, but me personally meeting Matt was actually at Penrith, racing at Penrith. But Matt used to go to my dad's slot car track back when he was running it, and used to race there a bit. And Matt was quite good at slot cars and that. And anyway, we were down at Penrith racing one Tuesday night, and Matt was there racing as well. I think he was racing buggies or something. And he came across and seen Dad, and he's like, "You're Phil Woodbury, aren't you?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, do you remember me when I was like 15 or something like that, coming to your track?" And to be honest, the rest, like it's history. Like Matt and I get along like brothers. So yeah, it's pretty funny how things can bring you back together, but it's all really the same sort of hobby, I guess.
Yeah, you guys were, just an incredible team. I mean, I remember the Kyosho Cup. You guys teamed up for that. I've got bizarre memories of some X-rated stuff you made out of power putty and a rain delay sometime.
Yeah, we used to be pretty good at keeping each other entertained. Back in the day, we used to have quite a few wild turkeys together and think up some good ideas. And, we had a lot of good times. And he built me some bloody fast engines, and also was really, I guess, instrumental in helping me with the car setup and teaching me different things about driving and car setup from what he's learned from real life 1-to-1 size cars. So
it took you a while to get that breakthrough major win. Do you want to tell us about that? Not the win that you got, about the little things that kept going wrong.
I had literally everything go wrong. It seemed like, if I'm honest, I went through a pretty rough time of results. Just, I don't know, little things like you'd be racing and then you'd strip a gear, or just silly little things that were happening when, and sort of costing quite good results. But yeah, it was funny that, like, I can't really remember them, I guess, exactly. I try to wipe that sort of stuff from my head, but I remember that, we had quite a lot of issues, and the funny thing, you know this story because you were the one involved in the story, but the one nationals, you were sort of saying that I've got a monkey on my back, and like you were painting my bodies at the time, and you painted a monkey on the back of my car, and it was the nationals that I ended up winning. So it was it's a funny little story because there was always monkeys on the back of my car now, and that was just because since you ever put the monkey on the back of the car, I won. So yeah.
It was just like that. It was, you just couldn't get a trick. It just couldn't win. I'm looking through some of the old photos, and you're on the podium in so many events, but it's not the top step. So yeah, it was definitely something on your back, but we took care of that.
Yep. And not just, to be on the podium was a good thing anyway. I wasn't too disheartened by being on the podium. It was always a good result, but you always want to get the win, that's for sure.
Can you tell us how you went from club racer to sponsored driver? Do you remember what happened with that?
I remember exactly what happened with that, because we kind of, as you were saying, we went through that bit of a rough sort of period where things weren't going quite right. And, I was a young teenager, and, being a young teenager, you know everything, and you probably have had enough of it if not everything's going your way. So yeah, ready to put your hands up in the air. So I'd actually decided to sort of stop racing a bit and step back, and I bought myself a go-kart. I was going to go do some go-kart racing. With all people that I actually went go-kart racing with. Do you remember Anthony Gattalaro?
Yes, I do.
Right?
Yeah.
actually bought his old go-kart and went racing. So it was an RC racer that I bought his kart off him and started racing. And I did like one race. And anyway, I had a ball doing that. But I think it was even like, he wouldn't have scripted it. It was when we were at the track with the go-kart. And Rob Reed actually called up Dad and said to him, Simon Camilleri's decided to stop racing. Does Phil want to be the Mugen factory driver? And, Dad was like, well, I can ask him. He's driving a go-kart right now, but I can ask him. So, yeah, and it was always a dream to drive for Mugen because I sort of always looked up to them when I was younger. So, yeah, that's how it actually happened. It was like if it didn't happen, I was probably stepped away from racing back then, which was a long time before I really started to do anything.
And what were some of the other victories you achieved in RC once you did sort of get that monkey off your back?
At the Worlds, coming sixth in the final at the Worlds was pretty big, and that was in the same year that I won the Nationals. So yeah, so that was a pretty big time. So it was getting the Nationals and then the World Champs and then the state titles after that. That was pretty successful part of my career, I think. I think that'd probably be the most successful.
Why did you decide to attend the Worlds, or were you asked to attend by Mugen?
I don't think I was asked to attend. I think it was that it was in the States, and I'd always wanted to go over there and race, and I love it over there, and there was quite a few Australians going as well, which was a big thing as well, that we could all go over there together, I guess. So yeah, it was just I'd been racing at a few international races, and then we decided that we'd go over there, especially after winning the Nationals that year. It seemed like a next step.
Do you remember where you qualified?
No. I remember it wasn't particularly great. I think it was the 32nd finals or something like that. Same deal. Like, it just didn't. I think we were having a few issues with running out of fuel over there as well. It was quite a big straight. Matt had built me the hottest motor known to man, and yeah, it was a struggle to get it through the 5 minutes. But yeah, so I think we had a couple of issues there. I probably made quite a few mistakes, but as a driver, you forget about those. It's always the mistakes that someone else makes that you remember.
I remember you having to change bodies as well. Was there something about a new body shape?
Yeah. Yeah, so we went over there, and it was one of those things. You go over there, and when we got there, everyone was like, no, you need to run this body. This is the new protoform body that everyone pretty much needs to run. So that was one thing. Probably the biggest thing that we went over there, we had a huge box full of tyres. Going to a World Champs, we thought, yeah, we'll probably need like minimum 37 sure, up to like 42, because we've got pretty good grip over here. But at a World Champs, you probably need pretty hard rubber. And then we got there, and they said, oh no, everyone's running 32s and 35s. No, I'd never even heard of a 32 before I went over there. So the little hobby shop at the track there, luckily, did a roaring trade that weekend. We had to buy all of our tyres for the whole weekend. We had this huge box of tyres that we'd taken over there, did not use one of them, and had to buy all of them over there. So yeah, so there was a couple of things like that.
And tell us about the final. So obviously you bumped up, made it to the main final.
Yeah, so it was already a pretty massive day. Like, we made it to the last day of the finals, but I think we were one of the first races on the last day. So we were pretty much racing the whole day. And, as you know, you don't get a lot of time in between finals and things like that. And once you bump up like 3 or so finals, it starts to take its toll on you. You don't know how you're going to get batteries charged in time, how you're going to get tyres treated in time, all that sort of stuff. So we got there, and it was a bit of a surreal experience, to be honest. Like, getting interviewed and that before the race, and they couldn't believe that I actually had to pay to go over there. They were surprised that I had to buy my own air ticket. But the final itself, we got off to a decent start, and it sort of fell to pieces about a few minutes in. The side belt fell off it, and it was probably just because it wasn't changed because we'd raced the whole day. And yeah, so that happened, sort of put us a bit behind. I think about halfway in or whatever, I had a spider come off my hat, and he decided that it was going to like just dangle down here in front of my
No
face.
way.
Yeah, so I'm like, I was like blowing this spider around, shaking my head. It was quite technical track to be shaking your head around. But anyway, I managed to get through that without too many rollovers, I think. And it was more of a thing to get to the end of the final of the Worlds, being an hour long. And I think we had a tyre change in the middle of it as well. So yeah, it was entertaining. It was a pretty big day though. I was wrecked by the end of it.
You mentioned there were a few other Australians heading over to the Worlds. Do you remember who went over with you?
Yeah, so we had, I think Jeff was there, Jeff Hammond, Stephen and Petey Jovanovic. Jesse was there, Jesse Davis. He was quite young at the time. And also Ash Seaward was over there as well. And, we had a really good time over there. Bunch of young Aussies, I guess, let loose in Texas. One of the first things we went to do was, I remember I think Brad Davis was over there as well. I think he was doing some timing or something. But we went to Walmart and decided to buy some BB guns because that's what you do when you're in America. You go and buy a gun. So we bought some BB guns, and I was driving the van back. This was like, I think I was 8. No, it would have been. I don't know how old I was. But anyway, I was driving back in the van. Matt was in the front seat. Jesse was in the back seat. And I think Brad was in the back seat as well. And anyway, we had to explain to Jesse, because Jesse, if you watch, I know that you will understand this, why we had to explain it to you. Do not shoot the gun in the car, because it seems pretty reasonable to everyone. Next minute, we heard this, and then they're like, well, don't shoot it. And then hear it again. We're like, stop shooting. He's like, oh, it's not working anyway. He was shooting it into his bag. And then in the bag, he had like a big tub of the ball bearing things, the plastic ball bearing things. And he was actually shooting it, and it was hitting the ball bearing thing. And it, like there was 10,000 or whatever in a thing. And he'd hit it, and it had broken out, and all of them had just gone through the car. Anyway, so that was the start of it. And we got back to the hotel, and Jesse walks in. I remember him having it tucked to the front of his pants, so you couldn't see the orange bit on the front of it to know that it was actually a BB gun. Had it tucked into the front of his pants walking around. And then I think the Jovanovic boys and that were all there at the pool. So then it obviously just turned into a shootout. So there was people there in the pool with no shirts on getting shot with BB guns, which was pretty fun at the time. And then I think Matt had this pump action shotgun version, and he decided, he thought he'd shoot me with it. And we were sitting on the bed, like laying on the beds in the same room. And he's like, I bet you, I reckon I could get you a big toe, because my feet were up on the bed. It's like, I reckon I could get your big toe from over here. And I was like, oh, bullshit. You couldn't get my big toe. And fair enough, from across the room, he hit my big toe. And it was the most painful thing I think I've ever experienced. And we went back to the track the next day and spoke to one of the American guys. And we said, oh, yeah, we went and bought BB guns, and we're like shooting each other with them and stuff. And he's like, oh, what? He's like, you guys are crazy. He's like, we kill birds with those things. And so, yeah, it was a good time. Lots of American culture brought into it with some shooting, I guess.
You got a lot more famous after the 2010 Worlds. I remember you in the full page ad in Racing Lines magazine. At the time, it was the best result for an Australian at an international event. How did that feel?
It felt pretty good. I don't think I'm not the sort of person that gets super excited about things, but it felt pretty good. And, you definitely, I guess we're proud to be an Aussie, I guess, was the thing that I'd say. It was nice to be able to um, represent Australia and also, show them the sort of talent that we had down here. Like, we had quite a talented, probably 4 or 5 people that went over there that were all capable of being in the same position or better position than I was. So I think it kind of put us on the map if it did anything. And it was humbling, I guess, when you came back and people were congratulating you, and also seeing all the comments and stuff online. People were up in the middle of the night watching it and stuff. So it was pretty cool.
I remember you releasing an engine as well. You worked with Matt to do an RB special sort of version. You remember the development of that?
So that was more on Matt's side, realistically. He's an engine guru. We had run engines with a very similar setup to that, so we kind of worked out a really good combination at the time of port sizes and things, and so he released that to an engine with RB, and that was pretty. I don't know, it was pretty exciting. I seen one on Facebook the other day, and like some marketplace thing, and I don't even know who was selling it. I don't know the guy, but someone actually mentioned it was a Matt Russell tuned TG engine that was run by Phil Woodbury at the blah blah blah. I didn't know who the person was. I was going to comment on it just to feel like, hey, can I buy it? But I didn't end up buying it. So
next came the decision to retire from RC. What brought about that?
I think I'd actually bought a little Mazda RX-2 that I was driving around, and I started to turn it into a bit of a race car, and I'd sort of gotten to the point with RC where I think if you do it for a long period of time, and it was to do it at a high level is you need to be fairly dedicated to it. And I probably got to the point where I wasn't enjoying it as much as what I did used to enjoy it. So I guess I sort of pulled the pin on it and decided, what, I'm going to go and race big cars because I like the adrenaline rush that comes with big cars, and I'd like to, have a bit of a go at that and see where it can take me. I was still kind of young enough to maybe have a bit of a crack at it. So it wasn't a decision that I took lightly, that's for sure. I sort of just over time, I think it built up that it was ready for me to hang up the controller
and pick up the racing gloves and the helmet.
Pick up the gloves. Yeah.
You've raced a few different classes. You want to run through, after the Mazda, what you got into?
Yeah, so we raced the Mazda to start with in historic racing, and then actually Dad did he did a drive day with John Bow. He bought a car and it came with a drive day with John Bow. And anyway, so we went down to Wakefield Park, and we sort of said, what, Dad sort of said to me, I'll go and take John out for a run in the car. And I was like, yeah, cool. We'll go for a bit of a squirt. And at that stage, I hadn't done much racing at all. But we had an automatic F6 Falcon out there and fanging it around. And I think, I was like 5 seconds quicker than the next person that was there for the day. And John come over to me and Dad at the end of the day, and he said to Dad, I think you need to get your son into racing something like properly, and I think he's gonna go okay, and if he races in something good. So if you need a hand, I reckon you should get him racing a Porsche. Buy him a Porsche then. And as you know, like that's what every kid wants their dad to be told, go and buy your son a Porsche. But anyway, so we made it happen. Bought a 997 Cup car and raced in the GT3 Cup Challenge with that, and that was absolute ball. Like, it was the best racing, best time. I prepped the car myself with the help from Matt. Did it all in the shed at home. learn how to work on a Porsche and change a Porsche gearbox and engine and everything. And the tie-up came with Ash Seawood from racing as well. He's got his own race team now. But, he sort of got us into the Porsches and showed us the ropes and that. So, the RC theme came out in that again. But after that, I think I'd won a few races, and it was about like time to move on with the championship. You needed to buy another Porsche, and the newer model Porsche, to continue the next year, and it wasn't really a fit for us. So we decided to go and race the Ute Series, which is the complete opposite of if you drove a Porsche backwards, you'd probably get the Ute Series.
You couldn't go from one extreme to the other, could you?
Yeah. So, and that was more about being able to get onto tracks that you're not normally able to get onto. The Ute Series, they were at all the big events, at all the street
that was
circuits,
supporting the supercars at the time, wasn't it?
supporting the supercars. So the tracks that you can't go and drive on, like Adelaide or something like that, you need to be able to get in one of those main categories to be able to get some seat time. So, we did the Utes for the year. It was a full-on year. I've never, not a panel beater, definitely not a panel beater, but I should be a panel beater after that year. It was pretty full-on. Like, it was a lot of people smashing into you, a lot of me smashing into other people, a lot of traveling. My parents hit the road with the big trailer on the back, and we started the lap around the country. So the first round was in Adelaide, the second round was in Perth, the third round was in Darwin, and the fourth round was in Townsville. So think about how many Ks were in that. It was huge for them. So they took their friends with them and did like a big caravanning tour with a race car on the back. And the trip to Darwin, I don't think they didn't come back. They just went from Darwin to Townsville because it was only 2 weeks in between racing. So they did that trip, and I remember I ended up in a fairly big shunt at Darwin, and then so you had to race a week later in Townsville, and you still had to get the car there. So the car was, by the start of Townsville, we had made the side of the car with orange tape because it was an orange car. We had made it look like it was still the same shape as what it was, just in orange tape. Get all the speed dints out of it. We raced the Ute. I ended up winning the Rookie of the Year championship, which was pretty good. Like, there's been some big names win that championship before me. But I got to the last round, and had a pretty massive shunt. Like, it was the biggest hit that I've ever had in a race car. So broke the car off, broke the engine in half, broke the gearbox in half, pushed it all back into the car. I think it was about this far. There was junk hitting me at my feet, and it was pretty big. So the end of that, it was kind of game over for Utes. And I had an opportunity in that year. I was leading the championship, and a guy called me out of the blue and just said, "Oh, would you like to race my Dunlop Series car for the Ipswich round of the Super 2 Series?" I think it was. Dunlop Series, I think they called it back then. It was a low budget shitter car, but I was pretty happy just to get into a supercar and drive it. In that year, I ended up getting to run the supercar at Ipswich, which was an absolute eye opener. I went from driving a V8 Ute one weekend to the next weekend driving a V8 Supercar, and it had zero practice. It was absolute steepest learning curve I've ever had. And then after that, we did with the next year we sold the Ute as it was. It was more about selling its franchise that it had. We sold the franchise for that, and I didn't do much racing for the year. I decided that I was going to do Bathurst in the supercar. So we did the Ipswich round in the Dunlop Series in that same car that same car that I'd ran the year before. We had Penrith on the side of the car. I don't know if you remember that car, but it looked
Yeah, I
pretty
do.
good. It was in super cheap catalogs and everything. I think it was like up until last year. I think it was still the Penrith car for the super cheap catalog. So that was pretty cool. But they didn't give us any money, so that was good. Thanks, Penrith. But we tried to entice them into giving us a deal for Bathurst. Didn't quite work out, but we ended up running Bathurst with some other sponsorship, and I think I came 15th in the main race there. So they had like an enduro for the Dunlop series, so it was 200 kilometres, full 2 pit stops, fueling by the supercar teams, everything. It was pretty, yeah, it was big. It was probably one of the highlights of what I've been able to do, I must say.
So with your full-scale one-to-one racing, did you draw anything from your RC experiences that helped you in full-size racing?
I think surprisingly, yes. I think a lot of people that race RC cars would understand, but a lot of people outside of that probably don't understand. I think the engineering fundamentals are still the same. It was actually easier, I must say, on the race car to be able to, identify a fault in the car, or where we could make setup changes and things like that a lot easier. When you race RC, you can't sit in it, you can't feel it. You've just got to look at it and go, yeah, it's understeering, it's doing this, it's doing that. I need to make a change. Whereas when you're in the car, you can feel it. I can say, yeah, I know what it's doing. I know what I can do to fix it. The pretty similar principles apply to spring rates and shocks and things like that. So there was a lot of the setup side of it that I carried across to it, and I was doing all my own setups on my cars from the Porsche to the supercar as well. For Bathurst, I did all the setup for the supercar, prepped it and stuff myself in the shed. So yeah, I must have learned a thing or two, I guess, from RC racing. The driving side of it, yeah, maybe a little bit in terms of how smooth you are and stuff with driving, but with the real racing, it comes down to how much you've got between your legs or something like that. I don't know.
So when you started full-size racing, did you have a game plan in mind?
I don't necessarily think there was a game plan in mind. I think there was some goals that I wanted to tick off. I always wanted to get to that, like anyone driving in Australia, you want to get to that supercar category and drive a supercar. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. I probably would have liked a national championship here or there. The Rookie of the Year one was probably as close I got. The Porsche thing, we nearly got pretty close to a national championship there. Just fell short with a few problems. But yeah, I think the goal was always to get to a supercar level. And, when you're involved in the whole sport, you start to really appreciate the guys that have been able to make it to that level. They are something special, and they also have some special checkbooks as well. So by the time you get to that level, you start to really realize how much things cost and how, how hard you need to work to get to that level. So,
out of all the tracks you've raced on, full size I'm talking about, which was your favourite? It's got to be Bathurst, right?
Yeah, it was pretty far ahead, I must say. And to be able to do it I did it in a ute, which was okay. It was probably good to do it in a ute for the first year because it wasn't very fast. But when you do it in a supercar, and if you can break into that, at the time it was around the 10s we were doing around there, so it was still fairly fast. And coming into the chase, the things on its limit are at 299, so it's pretty fast. You don't feel anything like that on any other track, I must say.
And then life takes over. Tell us what you're up to nowadays. You got time for any racing anymore?
Life does take over. Working, I sort of, decided to focus more on my career, and I've got my son now, so he takes up a fair bit of my time. But I'd still, I still dabble around with cars, and we're building an XY GT with Dad at the moment, which is nearly finished. So we've got that. I went and brought myself a R31 Skyline a few weeks ago from Mount Druitt. I thought it was stolen. Got there and it wasn't stolen, which was good. So I've got that. I want to do a bit of drifting and just some fun stuff with it. So I started to pull it apart a few weeks ago, and sort of at the point now where I'm nearly ready to do an engine rebuild on it.
You mentioned your son, the next generation of Woodbury. Is he racing yet? How old is he?
Yeah, so Austin's 3. He's a little legend. I love him. Unless you've met him, and you've met him, Tony, he's very hard to describe to people how charismatic he is. He races at Penrith. He's, as I said, 3 years old. He comes down. He doesn't really race at Penrith. He comes down to visit your son and also your daughter and Braden Stanley, just to hang out and tell them lots of stories. But he also gets to drive his little stadium truck around, and he does a lap, and Tate walks around with him for a lap at the start of the racing, and he absolutely loves it. Like I've never pushed it down his throat. I've never said you need to start racing. He's always just, he's seen my cars hanging up in the shed and things like that and been interested in them. But as soon as he got one, you could really tell that, I don't know, must be genetic. I don't know. He just loves it.
Yeah, definitely something in the genes. He's a legend, and there's lots of father-son teams in RC, and I wouldn't be surprised to see another father-son Woodbury team top of the podiums in years to come, mate. He's a legend.
I hope so. I've had a lot of good experiences with my family with RC racing, so I hope I'm able to do the same with him moving forward. So it's exciting. It's exciting to be on the other side of it. I don't have the pressure on this side, I don't think.
As long as you do the wheel nuts up tight enough and the wheels don't fall off.
Exactly. And I think it's, as long as you pay the bills, it's probably all right too.
And you mentioned your parents' support that you've had over all the years. They're still involved with RC. You want to tell us what they're up to?
Yeah, so Mum and Dad still they still go down to Penrith every Tuesday night. And how many years has it been? How many years do you think it's been? Maybe
I think 2002 or 3 would be the earliest, somewhere around there.
So it's been a lot of years, and even a lot of years since I stopped racing, to be honest. Like, I can't get down there because I live up in Bathurst now, so it's quite a commute. But so they go down every week. Since before Corona. Dad sells a few parts and things down there. Mum helps out in the canteen, and they also take Austin down for his little social session / racing experience. So they're still involved in the Penrith club, and they probably the social side of racing is probably bigger than the racing side of it itself, and Dad's never really been into the racing himself, so they're still able to get their social fix, which is good.
And what advice would you give to anyone who's watching and is thinking about getting into RC or getting their kids into RC?
I guess the advice that I'd give them is, if they're going to get their kids into it, I'll let them have fun, let them, be there with their mates and socialise with their mates and stuff. It is, at certain levels they get to, it gets quite serious. But at the end of the day, they're still kids. And I think that's probably the thing that kept me racing as long as I did, and enjoying it as long as I did. I didn't really have any pressure from my parents to do well. I just put all the pressure on myself. And, it was, I wanted to do it, and they were always there to support me. So I think that's good advice for if your kid's doing soccer or anything. just be there for them and support them in what they want to do.
I mentioned to a few followers that we're having a chat with you, and they wanted me to ask you a few questions. You up for them?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Out of all the cars you've driven, what is your favourite?
By far, my Porsche 997 GT3 Cup car. People would think that I would say V8 Supercar, but that Porsche Cup car was something else when it came to handling. It's a real driver's car.
Next question. Where did your colour scheme come from for your RC body shells?
So I started off, I think, I had an orange spray can, and I wasn't very good. It wasn't very artistic, so I had an orange and white. And that was the idea behind that was just so that I could see the car. We did do a lot of night racing when we raced at Penrith, and it was pretty practical to have a fluoro car so you could see it quite well at night time. So to start off with, it was that, and then I think then I started to get you to paint my bodies. They look much better after that.
Thank you.
I ended up, I think we just decided to, go with a couple of the, mostly white and some flamey looking things. And it wasn't any technique. It wasn't like, I went out with a specific thing. You just kind of designed it, and I had a couple of colors, and then the first one was pretty mad. So I decided that's it. We'll go with that.
All right, now for a bit more fun. This has been a very enjoyable chat, and we really appreciate your time. RC rapid fire questions. All right, these are easy. You ready?
Yep, let's go.
Favorite food?
I'd say burgers.
Beer, wine, or spirit?
Absolutely beer.
Best RC track you've raced on?
Brendale.
Ford or Holden?
Oh, Ford. Gosh.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
What was the last song you played?
Last song I played was Last Resort by Papa Roach. I want to elaborate on that, but I won't. Okay.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes.
Do you have any superstitions?
Apart from a monkey being on the back of my RC car, no.
And what's your daily drive?
This contradicts my first answer to Holden Ford. It's a Holden Colorado or an Isuzu D-Max.
Awesome, mate. That's been great. A lot of fun. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing your memories. Any final words? Anyone you want to thank or acknowledge?
No, thank you for the time. It's been the whole interview process has been really good. It's been good to bring back a few good memories, things that I'd actually forgotten about. You showed me some photos and things that I hadn't seen for such a long time. But it's part of all of it, thanks. I always want to thank my parents for what they did in my RC career and also my driving career, but also Matt Russell. He was a big part of both of those, but as well, pretty much travelled everywhere together and did everything together for quite a long period of time. So, thanks to those guys. Thank you to you. It's been a really fun experience. So,
my pleasure, mate. It's been good catching up, and I look forward to seeing you at the track again in the not too distant future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tony.